Hello and welcome to another edition of the Legendary Column Lectures here on YouTube. As always, I am your host, Sheku Putka Kamara. For today's edition, we're talking management and to a larger extent, effective management. What and what must we take into consideration, the do's and the don'ts? Stay with me for the next few minutes. So now, ideally, there has not been any universal definition as to what management really is. And like I would always say, in the fields of communication and the social sciences, hardly would you get those universal norms. What happens normally is that a range of scholars would always propound on a range of definitions. So one school of thought that did stand out in so far as management may be concerned is the argument that, among other things, management is the utilization of available resources for the attainment of predetermined objectives. Now, when you talk available resources, we're talking four fundamental aims in management: money, manpower, machinery, and minutes. But before we go into explaining what these four aims really mean and their roles and responsibilities in management, let us effectively dissect the definition in itself. Now, if we say management is the utilization of available resources, we're making an argument that you cannot effectively manage anything if the resources are not available. Because when you're talking management, you're talking controlling, you're talking manpower, you're talking analyzing. So if we say the utilization of available resources, things have to be put in place. Whether it is about the equipment, whether it is about the manpower, whether it is about the money or the finances you need to keep the institution or organization running, you really have to utilize accordingly. Because when we say the utilization of available resources for the attainment of predetermined objectives, it is a fundamental proposition that every institution is expected to have its vision and mission. The vision is actually where you want to see yourself in years to come, whilst the mission is what you instantaneously do as time progresses to make sure that you attain the possibilities of gaining the vision. So at the end of the day, if you say you want to attain predetermined objectives, the question is, are you doing what you're supposed to do? Because if we come back to the idea of the four M's, we're talking money. Every institution makes use of money. The day-to-day operationalization of every institution is dependent on its available resources. So whatever the level of management you find yourself, whether it is top management, which is the senior management for almost every institution, or the middle management, or the lower management, you have to make use of money. If you're going to recruit people, they are either on salary or on stipend, because at the end of the day, people work to get income, most cases. Now, if you're not going to have those finances to upkeep your institution, then chances are effective management may be questionable. Now, aside salaries, the upkeep of your institution is important. You're talking energy, electricity, you're talking water, you're talking basic cost of living, because at the end of the day, every institution has its primary targets. You need people to do the job. And in recruiting those people, you actually have to ensure that you go in for trained and qualified personnel. That is why even when job adverts are put out, it is always stated that people should have the requisite academic and practical experiences, because at the end of the day, that is what informs quality decision making. So aside from the money, you need the manpower. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have the people to do the work, chances are you may not be in a position of realizing objectives. So you also need those trained and qualified people to do the work accordingly. So from the manpower, you're talking machinery, equipment. No matter how you look at it, depending on the kind of institution or the organization that you find yourself, the machinery or equipment play a fundamental role in attaining institutional objectives. Because in the end, if you're known for producing certain results, you definitely need those machineries to ensure that they aid you in providing those results. Because in the end, people normally judge you by your last performance. If you're going to have a challenge, they may not understand what has resulted to that challenge. Now, ideally, in problem-solving perspectives, we would normally say mankind cannot live without problems. But the ability to understand and see those problems as challenges or opportunities to enhance effective growth is what really matters. And then lastly, minutes, time management. Many a time you have some institutions that would always suggest that timing is not of essence or it's not important. I would always argue that this is not the case. Time management requires that people work with time and ensure to meet deadlines. This is important in achieving results. Whether you want to achieve a result in time, that is before the stipulated time, or on time, that is the actual time, time management plays a key role. Now, let us assume that you're having a meeting at 2. In most cases, it is very likely that such meetings may not start until after 2. Whilst difficulties exist, it is important that we make strategic decisions insofar as time management is concerned. If there's any room for a postponement or for a shift or a change of time, then that has to be communicated. In some of my discourses, I have always said that the ability to effectively communicate is also a fundamental aspect that aids in effective management. Because if you're going to control, if you're going to analyze, if you're going to make sure that you pass on commands to subordinates, then strategic communication is key. And in the communications process, it always starts from a sender to the receiver. And the feedback could either be positive or negative. Where you are talking effective communication, it is expected that the feedback is positive. So, in the context of strategic or effective management, if you say you want to utilize the available resources to attain predetermined objectives, it is a caution or a matter of using what you have to get what you want. Because in the end, you do not want to leave room for excuses. So, I would hold it here for now and go for a short break, and when we come back, we would go to the end of the discourse. So, welcome back. Today we're talking management and to a larger extent effective management. We made a fundamental proposition that, among other things, if we say management is about the utilization of available resources for the attainment of predetermined objectives, we did look at the 4 M's in management: money, manpower, machinery, and the minutes. Sometimes I get questions like, if you have all the 4 M's in management, is it still possible for you not to achieve results? I would always tell you that the answer is yes, but sometimes it depends on the circumstance, and I'll tell you why. Assuming you have the requisite manpower, people that are trained and qualified, but then they are not willing to do the work, chances are you're not going to achieve results. And this is why staff morale is key. In employee relations and employee communications, it is expected that there should be a cordial relationship between people internally. By internal publics, we're talking about people within the institution. And of course, by external, we're talking about people outside. Employee communication or relations would suggest that there should be that cordial relationship between the top management, the middle management, and the lower management of every institution. So that when you give people tasks to perform, they would perform and execute them accordingly. Otherwise, it will be a fruitless endeavor. And even when you talk machinery, if you're going to have all the relevant equipment, but without the trained and qualified people to use those equipment accordingly, that can also question effective management. So to me, if you're going to attain strategic management principles, it is not just about having the 4 M's. It is about having all of those 4 M's and making sure that people are readily always available to accomplish tasks and functions accordingly. If people are not in place to accomplish tasks and functions, then that could be questionable, because there have been instances where an institution may have everything that it takes, but when it comes to executing the tasks and the functions, it may be a problem. So that is why care has to be taken. And sometimes Communication, like I would always say, is always of essence, because in the end, if people understand what should be taken into consideration, it would go a long way to making sure that effective management principles are achieved. And like always, every institution is expected to have its set objectives. Where that is the case, the employees in that institution must now have a responsibility of going by the codes of conduct of the institution and to ask for relevant materials that will aid in executing tasks where necessary. This is not to suggest that you should ask on a random or a rampant note, but what is of essence is the fact that if something can add up to institutional value, then it is always of essence to get those things. And like I said, management is not a one-off thing. It is always a process. The more you do it, the better you become. And the more you tend to understand some of those things that question your effectiveness, the better you get at addressing some of those issues. So that is why it is an ever-evolving process. So I want to thank us all very much for staying with us for this brief session on management and, to a larger extent, effective management. Many thanks to the production team, Abubakarr Tappiah Sesay, and of course, Akim. Until some other time, I have been your host, Sheku Putka Kamara.